Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is Suspects and Spirits, and I'm your host, Taylor Seraphin. First, I just wanted to say thank you for the listeners who have been writing reviews. I really appreciate it. Keep up the reviews. They really are helping my podcast analytics. Like, you have no idea. You have no idea how much it helps. So, thank you. And also, thanks for the emails. Thank you guys for submitting your stories. I can't wait for the next Booze Clues episode. I got some really good stories coming up for you guys. So, again, you got stories, send them to me. I want them. And just let me know if I can use your name. If not, tell me that too. And I won't use your name. No big deal. That being said, thank you for all the other emails. You guys are actually really supportive, and I have a lot of awesome listeners who seem to be really enjoying the podcast. I didn't think that this many people would even be listening. I thought it would just be like 10, like my family and some friends. So, pretty cool to see the analytics going up. I appreciate it. Keep spreading the word. Tell your friends, tell your family, all of that. I hope everybody enjoyed their weekend. I hope everyone's having a good start to their week. Oh, I'm sorry. I got to adjust a little bit because, okay, there we go. I'm a little sore. I wish I could say I'm sore from doing something cool like a 5K or going hard on leg day, but I'm sore from a slip and slide. 'Cause I'm old. So, yeah, I went to my niece's birthday party over the weekend, and it was actually her birthday party and my sister-in-law's party combined. They share a birthday, so they had a combined birthday party. It was really fun, and it was so much fun that the adults decided, "These kids are having a blast on the slip and slide. We're cool. We're gonna slip and slide too." And let me tell you, it was so much fun. Lots of soap in lots of places, but really fun, and the kids had a blast watching the adults do it. I'm still very sore. We were laughing and telling the kids about, the old school slip and slides, like the Crocodile Mile. That thing wrecked your stomach, your chest, your back, and even your ass if you slipped and fell. That was not for the weak, okay? The 80s and 90s, they really built us kids, us millennials, into strong adults who could slip and slide all day long. This slip and slide was cool because it was inflatable, but you're still gonna be sore the next day if you're over 30. So, it's definitely much more comfortable than the tarp, the literal tarp that we just slid across as children. So, I don't know, maybe I just need to hit the gym more. Maybe I got too much lactic acid built up in my body. I don't know. But if you need me, I'll be in an ice bath later. All right, guys. Today's episode, oh gosh. All right. This episode is so mind-boggling. Like the more research I do, the more confused I get. And I guess not so much confused, but I get frustrated. I want to know what happened here. You guys might know this case. Today we're talking about Asha Degree. No one really knows what happened to this little girl. There is a lot of speculation, a lot of deep dive Reddit threads, but only theories. There's no real concrete answers. So let's get into the details. Our story unfolds in February of 2000 in a quiet town called Shelby, nestled just west of Charlotte, North Carolina. At the center of this story is a 9-year-old girl named Asha Degree. She lives with her older brother, 10-year-old O'Brien, and their parents, Akila and Harold Degree. On Sunday, February 13th, this was just an ordinary day in the Degree household. The family went to church that morning like they always do. They had lunch at a relative's house, and the kids enjoyed some early Valentine's Day candy. Afterward, Akila took the children home from this relative's house, and Harold headed off to his second job. It was a familiar rhythm for them, it was their routine. That evening, as usual, Akila planned to give the kids a bath before bedtime, but a car accident nearby knocked out the power in the neighborhood, kind of, shaking up their nightly routine, which we've all been there. It kind of sucks. You're like, well, guess we're not making dinner, and I guess you're not having a bath. So, despite this, the children were still tucked in at their usual time, around 8:30 p.m. Aisha had on a white nightgown with red trim, and her hair was tied up in pigtails. The plan was to get up a little early the next morning to make up for the missed bath. Now this is when the story begins to blur a little bit, because between 8:30 p.m. when she put the kids to bed and around 2:30 a.m., the timeline here becomes a little murky. I combed through so many articles, so many forums, archived news reports, newspapers. trying to piece together every moment in the Degree household during those crucial hours of the story. But the information is very inconsistent. Okay, I'm going to be very upfront with you guys. It is not consistent across any platform, and it's frustratingly vague. So some of the original sources from 2000 are either lost or just nearly impossible to track down. But here's what is generally agreed upon. This is the most consistent things that I have found. At some point during the night, the power did come back on. That much is very consistent, runs across all accounts. The discrepancies begin with Harold's return home. One version of events says that Harold arrived back from work around 12:30 a.m., with the lights already having been restored by then. Some sources suggest he stayed in for the night and watched a bit of TV to unwind and then went to bed around 2:30 a.m. Other accounts claim that he made a stop after work, specifically to buy Valentine's Day candy for the kids. Now, depending on which version you read, he either came home at 12:30 a.m. right after work and went to bed at 2:30 a.m., or he returned for the night directly after his store trip. But despite these varying details, there is one fact that remains extremely clear, and that is by the morning of February 14th, Asha Degree was gone. And that's when this story becomes something else entirely. Now, there's one particularly strange version of events floating around out here. One I came across once or twice and could never trace back to any credible source. In this version, Harold supposedly comes home around 12:30 a.m. and finds Aisha sitting on the couch, dressed in everyday clothes, watching TV. He supposedly tells her to go back to bed. It's an odd detail and honestly one of the most puzzling claims I came across, but without a solid source to back it up, it's impossible to say if that ever actually happened. Now, you might be wondering, why are you telling me this? But if you know the story, you know why. This is the frustrating part of researching, underreported cases, especially ones that happened decades ago. A lot of the original reporting is gone or buried in old archives. So, what's left online often reads like a messy game of telephone. Stories repeated or twisted or embellished and sometimes just flat out invented and wrong. It becomes almost impossible to tell whether the confusion is coming from the original witness accounts or from years and years of speculation online. So I'm doing my best here. Please stay with me. This is a really important story. I personally lean toward the theory that many of these strange details were added later by, people desperate to make sense of a senseless situation, trying to force a narrative into the empty spaces left behind. But we'll get into a bit more of that down the road. Let's get back to what we do know that has been consistent. So, reputable sources, including the FBI and the Charlie Project, agree that Harold checked on his kids around 2:30 a.m. before going to bed. At that point, both children were asleep. They were in the bedroom that they shared. Sometime later, in the early morning hours, Aisha's brother O'Brien woke up and noticed her just standing in the room. It's believed that she might have simply, gotten up to use the bathroom. He heard her bed creak a few moments afterward and assumed she'd climbed back in. He didn't actually look, he just figured she was settling in and went back to sleep. Just a few hours later, at 5:45 a.m., their mother Akila woke up. She had set her alarm early to get the kids ready for school. And remember, specifically to give them that bath that they missed the night before due to the power outage. In an interview, Akila recounted what that morning was like. She was quoted telling a newspaper reporter, "I woke up on February 14th, 2000 at 5:45 a.m. The alarm went off for my children to go to school at 6:30 a.m. I went to the bedroom 2 feet away from the door to start the bath water because they could not take a bath the night before since we had a power outage. I opened the bedroom door. My son O'Brien was under the covers as he usually slept. I called his name and he jumped up as usual. I realized that Aisha was not in her bed." End quote. She did everything that they normally do with the exception of the bath. Akila later told the same reporter how the realization set in slowly and then kind of all at once. At first, she assumed Aisha must have wandered into another room. Maybe she'd curled up beside O'Brien's bed or something. She'd done that before, but she wasn't there either. She checked the living room, No Aisha on the couch. She looked in the kitchen. Still nothing. Then came the closets. One by one, she opened every single closet, hoping she'd find her daughter tucked away, hiding, playing, something. But the house was silent. And that's when the panic really started to set in for Akila. She rushed into the bedroom, waking up Harold as she quickly threw on some clothes. Together, they tore through the house again, double checking. They checked the cars just in case Aisha was in there. They started calling family, anyone they could think of. Harold's mother actually lived across the street, so they thought maybe Aisha went over there for some reason, and she wasn't there. Aisha's aunt was the only one that they'd had lunch with the day before, but she hadn't seen her either. No one had seen her. No one had heard from her. Where did she go? It was after that, when every possible maybe had been ruled out, that Akila called her own mother, completely frantic. She told her what was happening, and her mother was trying to stay calm, and she said the one thing that any of us would say in that moment: hang up the phone and call the police. So that's exactly what they did. Now, I want to be upfront about this next part. The transcript I'm about to share comes from one of the more obscure corners of the internet. I spent literal hours of my life sifting through discussion threads, archived forums to find this. I cannot guarantee its accuracy the way I could with like an official news source, but it is consistent across several accounts. Okay. So it lines up with what we know factually. This is the reported 911 call placed by Asha Degree the morning that Aisha went missing.
911, what's your emergency?
Yes, I'd like to report a missing child. From where? From my house. What's your address? 3404 Oak Crest Drive. Is this an apartment? Yeah. In which apartment? Apartment 3406. Okay, is she missing from 3404 or 3406? 3404, sorry. There's not an apartment number? It's not like an A or a B? No, and what's your name? Asha Degree. Your phone number, Harold? What's the child's name? Asha Degree. What's her full name? Asha Draquilla Degree. Degree? Yeah. How old is she? 9. White or black? Black. When did you last see her, Harold? Last time I went to bed, she was in bed. I got up this morning, called her to get up to go to school, and she wasn't there. Her book bag's missing and her pocketbook. All right, Harold, I'll have an officer get in touch with you as soon as possible. If you happen to find her in the meantime, please call us back and let us know. He then thanked her and they said goodbye. Now, we have no idea if she was still in the same clothes that she went to bed in. Remember, she was wearing a white nightgown with red trim and she had pigtails. And her brother didn't hear her leave at all. He did see her at one point awake in the room, but he figured she was, up going to the bathroom or something. You don't really second guess these things, like, especially when you're a child. When you've always shared a room with someone, you're just used to things like that happening. I don't wake up in the middle of the night when my husband goes to the bathroom. I don't think anything of it. By 6:40 a.m., police had arrived at the Degree home. They immediately began a thorough search of the house and surrounding area. Search dogs were brought in to help, but surprisingly, they weren't even able to pick up Aisha's scent. They couldn't pick it up in the home, in the yard, along the street, anywhere, which is so weird, not even in the home. After clearing the home and confirming that Aisha was not hiding somewhere inside, officers widened the search perimeter to include the neighboring blocks and nearby streets. By 7 a.m., word had begun to spread. Friends, neighbors, members of the community, everyone was shaken. They started showing up to help, and it became a door-to-door, street-by-street effort. People scoured backyards, they checked wooded areas, they combed through ditches. But despite the growing number of volunteers and the intense local effort, there was nothing. No footprints, no dropped belongings, no signs of struggle. It was as if Aisha had just vanished into thin air. Meanwhile, police began treating the Degree home with the seriousness of a potential crime scene. They documented everything. They looked for signs of forced entry, clues of a break-in, or any indication that someone else had entered that house that night. But nothing stood out. There were no broken locks, no footprints, no damage, no blood, no evidence of a struggle. In fact, there was no evidence at all that anyone other than the family had been in that house. And yet, Aisha was gone. What's even more unsettling is that investigators started to consider the possibility that she hadn't been taken. but that she had been left on her own, voluntarily. That theory was supported by a few key pieces of information. Her backpack was gone, her small purse was missing, and several pieces of clothing and a pair of sneakers had disappeared with her. Now, these weren't things that a kid would just forget. Kids are going to put on their shoes, most kids at least, before they go outside. And then there was a neighbor's statement. Someone reported seeing a young girl walking along Highway 18, not far from the Degree home in the early hours of the morning. That sighting and the missing items pointed toward one of the most perplexing and heartbreaking possibilities, that Asha had snuck out entirely on her own. So, did she really leave on her own? And if she did, why? And where was she headed in the middle of the night during a storm at just 9 years old? And what was she planning to meet somebody? I'm sorry. Why would a 9-year-old leave in the middle of the night to go meet up with someone? That doesn't make any sense. They had even said Asha was very scared of thunderstorms, and it was storming that night. She was scared of the dark. She was scared of thunderstorms. Why the hell would she go out in the middle of that if that was something she was knowingly scared of? It doesn't make any sense. So once law enforcement began to seriously consider the idea that Asha left voluntarily, they started wondering if this was something she'd been quietly planning. But her parents, Harold and Akila, have always insisted that is just not possible. It would have been completely out of character for her. They didn't even have a computer at home. Outside of school and basketball and church, they weren't exposed to a whole lot. And more than that, Asha was terrified of the dark, of thunderstorms. Like I just said, she's terrified of those things. So why would she just willingly leave her house in the middle of the night when it's pouring rain? It doesn't add up. Her parents described her as very shy and cautious. She wasn't dramatic. She'd never threatened to run away. And while children running away isn't unheard of, it's very rare for kids from stable homes to do something like this young. I'm not saying that kids from stable homes don't run away. That happens. But she's 9. Runaway cases typically start around the age of 12, not 9, and not from a family who seems to be doing all the right things. But of course, they're still like, well, she must have run away. All signs pointed to Asha leaving on her own volition. Her backpack was missing, and it looked like it had been packed ahead of time. She had her house key in it, and when her parents woke up, all the doors were locked. She didn't just leave, she locked the door behind her. Then there were those early morning sightings along Highway 18. 2 motorists also reported seeing a little girl walking alone in the rain around 3:30 or 4 a.m., about a mile from her home, and she matched Asha's description. She was walking in a direction that she would have been familiar with, her school bus route, only she wasn't wearing her nightgown anymore. In these accounts, she had changed into jeans and a white long-sleeve shirt, an outfit her family confirmed was missing from her room. One of the drivers even turned around to check on her, but when he rolled down his window, Asha darted off the road and disappeared into a nearby tree line. And no one called 911. Not a single person that night called 911 saying, hey, there's a little child, a little baby girl on the road in the pouring rain. Wouldn't you call 911? I would call 911. You don't just leave a kid to run off into the woods on their own in the middle of a thunderstorm. You don't leave a kid, period. So that was the last known sighting of Asha Degree. It wouldn't be until 2 days later that searchers found any trace of her. They found a few personal items inside of a random shed off that same highway, Highway 18. There were candy wrappers from a recent basketball game, a green marker, a Mickey Mouse hairbow, and a pencil. She had definitely been there, but she was already gone. And then nothing. No more traces of her. Nothing. For 18 months. Until a contractor who was working 26 miles away in a totally different direction uncovered a double-wrapped black trash bag buried on his property. Inside of it was Asha's backpack with her name and her phone number written on it. Why would anyone wrap a child's backpack in 2 bags and bury it? Was someone trying to preserve it or hide it, but in a way that could eventually be found? But authorities did make one thing clear after that. They now considered Aisha's disappearance to be a criminal matter, and they suspected foul play. Could someone have lured her out that night? And if so, who? There was no computer in the house, no sign of grooming or contact. And if it was someone she knew, someone in her circle, they managed to stay under the radar for 25 years. They also managed to get her to somehow come out of her home, lock all the doors, leave quietly, not waking up a soul. What was she running toward? Or was she running from something? Did she leave on her own volition? Personally, I don't think so. Since then, a few more pieces have surfaced, like the tip that she was seen getting into a classic dark green car the night she vanished. It was either a 1970s Lincoln Continental or a Ford Thunderbird. Both of these cars are extremely rare, especially in the year 2000, especially now. I mean, if someone had that car, you would remember that. The only person who's come forward and said, "Oh, I saw this happen," was in 2016. Why did you wait 16 years? No one else has come forward. No one has ever identified the driver. Now, there was one other suspect looked into. His name was Donald Ferguson. In 2014, Donald Ferguson was finally arrested in South Carolina for the 1990 rape and murder of a 7-year-old Shalonda Poole in Greensboro. Due to similarities with Aisha's disappearance, Cleveland County investigators reviewed whether he may have been in the area around the time Aisha vanished in February of 2000. But law enforcement, they checked his whereabouts in February of that year, and they found no evidence connecting him to Aisha's case. He hasn't been officially named a suspect and no links were established, but on a lot of forums, like Reddit, users have speculated that Donald Ferguson maybe knew a family member. He had a family connection and he somehow groomed Aisha through those connections and lured her out of the home. Now, of course, these claims, they remain anecdotal and unverified. There's no public record confirming that they're factually based or supported by law enforcement at all. So please don't take that for fact. It's just a theory. Either way, though, Donald Ferguson seems to have been a piece of human garbage. Other online theories about a similarly named individual with alleged drug ties and grooming behavior are speculative, but not corroborated by credible sources. So while Ferguson was investigated due to very disturbing similarities with previous crimes, officials' hands were just tied. Like they were forced to drop no direct connection to Aisha's case. Public speculation persists to this day, but without new credible evidence, these remain unfounded. This family deserves some kind of closure. I mean, what happened? Could someone have lured her out? And if so, who? They didn't even have a computer in the house. So there was no sign of grooming, contact, anything like that. What I don't know if they ever looked into, does she sleepwalk? Like that's one theory that I read online. Was she a sleepwalker? Our oldest used to sleepwalk and our youngest still does. And I always make sure this house is like Fort Knox at night. I mean, if you've seen the things that people do when they're sleepwalking, people have been known to like drive cars asleep. It's pretty scary. I mean, it's not an impossible theory that she may have woken up in the middle of the night. She was sleepwalking and she thought, it's time for school. Got to pack my bag, packed some odd things, and then got dressed, locked the door behind her, and went outside to wait for her bus. But since it was the middle of the night and the bus wasn't there, she may have just continued walking in that direction. Because remember, they said she was walking in a direction that was familiar to her. So, no, it's not an impossible theory. But if that's what happened, oh, that poor baby, she may have run into somebody with some very sinister intentions. All right, now with those theories aside, let's get into the evidence and some of the newer developments that have occurred. Because remember earlier, I had mentioned Aisha's backpack. It had been found. On August 3rd, 2001, over a year after she had gone missing, a construction worker stumbled across Aisha's backpack, buried in plastic bags along Highway 18 in Burke County, about 26 to 30 miles north of Shelby. So very far from where she was. Inside of the backpack were a library book that she had checked out just days before vanishing, Dr. Seuss's McElligot's Pool, a New Kids on the Block concert t-shirt that she'd never worn, a pencil, and a handful of personal items, including and undershirt. But the most important thing found that day wasn't visible at all. At the time, the discovery was a mystery without a name, but now we have names. Because just recently in 2024, just this past year, thanks to advanced forensic DNA technology, investigators tested items from the backpack, and what they found changed everything. A hair strand embedded in the fabric of Aisha's undershirt was genetically linked to a woman named Anna Lee Dedmond Ramirez. In 2001, she would have only been 13 years old. She was a classmate of Aisha's, a local girl, but she wasn't the only connection that emerged. Another DNA profile pulled from those same items and the surrounding bags matched a man named Russell Bradley Underhill. He died in 2004, but during his life, he'd stayed at a group home property owned by the Dedmond family. Investigators believe that something happened to Aisha, and it wasn't good. They believe that an adult helped hide Aisha's body because Anna Lee was too young at the time to manage something like this alone, and Underhill, he may have helped dispose of evidence. So, in September of 2024, investigators executed a search warrant on the Dedmond property, and they weren't just looking for electronics, they were looking for a car. Remember the car? They found it, a green 1964 AMC Rambler hidden away on their land. Why are you hiding the car? This vehicle closely matches the description given by two eyewitnesses back in 2000 who reported seeing a girl matching Aisha's description getting into a green car along the highway in the early morning hours. It also matches what the person said in 2016. Back then, people described it as a dark green 1970s Lincoln or Thunderbird. It's unclear whether memories blurred the details over time or whether more than one vehicle was involved. But the Rambler, it was enough to raise serious suspicion. And honestly, if you don't know cars, they look somewhat similar. So this raised a lot of suspicion, especially when one of the Dedmond daughters later admitted she had driven that very car around the very night that Aisha went missing. A few months later, in February of 2025, this year, investigators executed a second wave of warrants, this time targeting the two phones of Roy Dedmond and two of his daughters, Sarah and Lizzie. Why? Because investigators had probable cause to believe those devices contained evidence of felony obstruction of justice. And the messages recovered, they were chilling. In one exchange, Sarah texted, quote, "They think it's our shirt. I'm scared. Dad is probably going to be a huge suspect." End quote. Lizzie replied, quote, "The theory is I did it. Accident. Covered it up." End quote. Now, of course, this is speculation, right? But there's a lot tying this family in right now. And this wasn't the only red flag. A witness also came forward and reported that at a party years later, after Aisha went missing, Lizzie drunkenly said, quote, "I killed Asha Degree," end quote, before her sister allegedly stepped in and warned her to stop talking. So, between the DNA matches, the recovered vehicle, the digital messages, and mounting circumstantial evidence, authorities now believe the case is no longer a mystery about a child who vanished into the night. They think it's a homicide investigation. I know this isn't the kind of news that we want in this circumstance. Like, we really don't want to hear that it's a homicide. But at the same time, we also have to be realistic. It has been 25 years. And while there are cases where missing children show up years and years later, J.C. Lee Duggard, for example, it's always a gamble when more time has gone by. So whether Aisha was lured, whether she sleepwalked or wandered off on her own, these new developments make you ask the horrifying question if maybe it was a hit and run. Some wonder if that was the case, and if it was, then the driver should be brought to justice. No arrests have been made in these new findings, but investigators may still be gathering conclusive proof of, who actually performed the alleged homicide and concealment. Because where is Aisha? If that's what happened, what did they do with her? They might also still be gathering additional forensic confirmation, like, actual physical remains. They might even be looking for some kind of sufficiently corroborating witness testimony to meet the legal threshold for charges. What we do know is that this case has evolved from a missing person investigation to an active homicide probe. Law enforcement is methodically piecing together hard evidence and testimonies, and the upcoming weeks, months, or years could be pivotal, especially as phone and vehicle evidence is analyzed. And for the first time in 25 years, it looks like the truth is finally beginning to surface. So Aisha, she hasn't been forgotten. Clearly, these people, they've been working nonstop to solve this case, which is amazing. That's what you want. I mean, that's all anyone could ever ask for is that you just keep trying, you don't give up. And justice may finally be coming for the little girl who left home with nothing but a backpack and disappeared into the darkness. Does this answer the long, lingering question of how the hell did she get out of her house in the first place? No, it doesn't answer that. That's still up for speculation. I'm still very, very confused about how this little 9-year-old left her home in the middle of the night. I just don't know why she would do that. That part still baffles me. But at least now we know that there are new developments in DNA in this case. I know this is a small podcast, but if you have any information, you are highly encouraged to call the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office at 704-484-4822. I also linked the phone numbers and information in the show notes. Gosh, this story it's going to keep me up forever. Forever. So yeah, that you guys, I know it's frustrating. There's no real ending, but that is the story, the haunting case of the disappearance of Asha Degree, still unsolved. I would love to hear your thoughts on this case. Please make sure that you share this with everyone. Go check out the Instagram post, the TikTok post about this case. It has her picture and what she could possibly look like at this age. So please share it. I know they're currently treating it like a homicide case, but you just never know. Just, err on the side of caution and share, share, share. Oh, these cases never get easier. Well, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you for listening. Thanks for doing your laundry with me or driving with me, whatever you're doing. I appreciate it. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Keep those reviews coming. They really do help. All the help I can get, I appreciate it. And remember to trust your lizard brain. Until next time, goodbye.